So Louis, this is so fascinating. I love that research. It makes it really challenging because, so my experience has been once an organization hits 3 billion in revenue with a B, it ceases to become a company and it morphs into a government with a lot of the opposite traits that you just laid out.
Isn't that interesting?
Yeah. And so what you're saying is a necessary thing. Let's break that staleness, that stuckness, so we can still innovate and grow and add value to our customers or whoever our constituents are. But it's challenging because sometimes the people that are more drawn to government entities, they want safety, they want security, they don't want risk. They don't want to put themselves out there. Or more importantly, as you wrote down those 5 items, curious, action-oriented, build bridges, risk-tolerant, kind of optimistic, keeps plowing forward. All 5 of those, you have to be willing to embrace vulnerability, which is not comfortable for a lot of us. And a lot of those big ecosystems, it's even more challenging. So how do you protect that so it doesn't get damaged because you're inside of a bigger world where people might not be quite the same as you?
Oh my gosh. You have a week? Let's talk. So on vulnerability, but also being able to kind of find your place and accept that inside an organization that sometimes feels like a government. That's exactly right. These organizations sometimes feel galactic. They feel impersonal. They feel like they're made for somebody else or something else. And that might be true. It's important to remember something, though, in a lot of these organizations, and I mean this in a really positive way. They started somewhere.
Yeah, right.
They started with somebody or some somebodies and an idea or some ideas, and they built them. And somewhere in that DNA, even in the largest, most seemingly intractable bureaucracies, there are ways to make that organization more nimble and to create innovation, especially if the right people are doing some of the right things. So that gets to people, but it also gets to self-selection. With people, one of the ways that you can find a path is to find a person or a group of people or an organization within the group that has a mission oriented around innovation or a commitment to it or both. By the way, one of the best ways to do this is to hire your right boss. If you find the best boss, and I've had a few of them who are amazing, then they serve as advocates and they clear the way through some of the challenges of a really well-intended but maybe kind of busy, distracted organization. As it relates to vulnerability, you're right. It's not comfortable being an entrepreneur. And in fact, that's one of the things that I really want to emphasize. We talk about it some in the book. The people I interviewed talk about it. You're going to have some tough times. You're going to have some bad days. And look, every job has risk. Every job has ups and downs. But this one has a wider range sometimes. And people are going to sometimes resist the change. And frankly, sometimes you're going to screw up. I sure have. And when you do, are you willing to say, hey, I learned from that? Or are you going to get all down and say, oh, this is terrible and whatnot? My perspective on this is even if it doesn't always feel good, almost every experience where you're vulnerable, if you're open and you're a learner, you figure out something new, you get stronger, you get better. And the best entrepreneurs take these, the successes and they magnify them. And when the successful entrepreneur finds places where they stumble or where something doesn't go quite well or they just feel totally exposed, they say, you know what? This is uncomfortable, don't like it a whole lot. Sometimes you need to reach out to some friends and supporters to make sure that you get through it, but then you get stronger and you're even better than the next time. Beautiful.
Okay, so far we've covered a lot of ground. We've talked about right conditions to start an entrepreneurship kind of venture or create that culture. We talked about how to build it, what are the necessary requirements. We talked about how to protect it, getting that right boss that can kind of shield you. And now I want to talk about the last thing and then we'll start to land our plane. I want to talk about how do you measure it? Because what's tricky when you're in that world, right? It's kind of like a bunch of siblings sitting around. This one sibling, we'll call her entrepreneurship,
yes.
Okay? She's held to a little different standard, which may not make the other siblings happy, right? The other siblings are held to a standard of they better deliver 5% growth, particularly in these big companies, right? 5-10% growth.
Yes.
This one over here, would be great if she delivers 30% growth, but she could also have a year where she loss of 10%. And we're okay with that because it's part of the process.
Yes.
But there's challenges with the other siblings saying, hey, why does she get to have 10% loss? And I can't afford that. So what are reasonable ways to measure an entrepreneurial venture? And what should a leader expect? Because there's probably leaders, in fact, I know there's leaders listening to this right now that want to put in place something entrepreneurial inside their business this year. And how should they measure that? What should success look like?
So I don't believe that there's a one-size-fits-all answer to that. However, there are some best practices. And the first best practice is whatever those metrics are in your business, they probably aren't, to the point that you're raising here about different siblings, they probably aren't the same ones for a mature business. And the number one mistake that people in large companies make is to apply more or less the same criteria for success to an entrepreneurial or emerging venture or initiative that are applied to a more mature business or initiative.